The top business stories, live from the Sky Newsroom. The Prime Minister says that the UK reserves the right to respond to Donald Trump's tariffs as British motor bosses meet ministers over their concerns. Thousands of first-time home buyers race to beat Monday's stamp duty deadline. Plus, life-size Pac-Man, the latest in the booming market for immersive entertainment experiences. A very good afternoon and welcome to Business Live with me, Dan McCaffrey, on this Friday. Sir Keir Starmer has said that the UK has the right to respond to US tariffs as the British government considers its response to Donald Trump's decision to hit car imports with a 25% tariff. Leaders from Britain's motor industry have been speaking to ministers this afternoon about those new tariffs. At the moment, the United States is the second biggest market for British cars after the European Union. The Prime Minister has said that there were ongoing negotiations with the White House about how to mitigate the impact of the new levies.
Obviously, any tariffs are concerning, and we're working hard with the industries and sectors likely to be impacted. None of them want to see a trade war, which is why we're engaged in discussions with the United States about mitigating the impact of tariffs. Now, that's what we're working hard on. But in answer to your question, yes, in the end, our national interest has to come first, which means all options are on the table.
There was the Prime Minister speaking a little earlier. Let's speak to Kevin Gaskell. He's the former Chief Executive of Porsche, BMW and Lamborghini. Kevin, very good afternoon to you. Being no doubt, this is difficult stuff, isn't it? Not least of all for those car manufacturers here in the UK. I think it's £7 billion worth of exports to the United States.
Yeah, it's incredibly difficult, and it comes on top of a difficult time. We've got a challenging economy. We've got the manufacturers requiring to transfer from internal combustion engine to electric vehicles. And so they're facing enormous storms at the moment. And this is just an increase in the pressure of that storm.
So if you were in the room today with those ministers, if the Prime Minister happens to be watching this programme, what's your kind of number one issue that you'd like them to address?
I think it's clear that Trump doesn't respond to aggression. So I don't think aggression is the way to go, but there's an explanation which is required, which is that global supply chains are now hugely sophisticated. There are components which are manufactured in the USA, which come over to Europe, which get built into vehicles, which then get sold back into the USA. And the chances of Trump's ambition being achieved, which is manufacturers will relocate to the USA, I think are pretty limited in the short term. Manufacturers make decisions over many years, and what we've seen is in and out situation with the tariffs, which mean that manufacturers will be sitting very quietly at the moment. They'll be making a noise, but they're sitting quietly, strategically, to understand what they should do. They will not make a decision based upon a short-term action.
What I find fascinating about this, Kevin, is I think there's actually only 101,000 cars were exported to the United States last year. It's not an enormous number, but as I say, worth $7 billion, because actually lots of these cars are quite high ends. And ultimately, the United States is important because you've got a lot of wealthy consumers there. Yes,
it's a very important market for the premium manufacturers. Jaguar, Land Rover and Aston Martin in particular have a very high percentage of their sales into the USA. My own business, Radical, we're the world's biggest manufacturer racing cars. It is our biggest market by quite a percentage. And so it's critically important as a market. Are we hopeful? Is the market hopeful that because we're targeting wealthy customers, that they will accept an increase in pricing? Yes, we're hopeful. But ultimately, we should be trading without tariffs. We need to see a free market.
And do you feel that principle that seems to be around and largely held to really since the end of the war is now faltering? And we do end up in a trade war. Britain may not impose tariffs, but probably likely the EU will. And when both sides then get entrenched, it becomes very difficult to roll back from that, doesn't it?
Yes, I think it does. There's a lot of rhetoric out there at the minute, and there's a lot of anger on both sides of the Atlantic. And we will anticipate a growing trade war over the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months. How we break out of that, well, I come back to my point, which is we need to educate people that if you want to develop a strong local manufacturing base, you don't do it by putting in tariffs, which stops the competition coming in. Companies get better by operating in a competitive market, by learning, by sharing, and by recognizing that technology is transferable these days. So let's not try and hide behind a tariff wall. Let's make sure that we operate together and that there's fair competition in the market.
OK, Kevin, really interesting stuff. We're going to wait, of course, for that confirmation, if it does come next week, of those tariffs. Kevin Gaskell there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Europe's car industry must now decide whether to plan for more production in America or swallow the extra costs, because this is not just going to act as here in the UK, but indeed across Europe. And Siobhan Robbins has been reporting from Germany.
At this factory in East Germany, they're pumping out a part a second. Millions of pieces destined for the country's mega motor industry. When it comes to cars, America is Germany's biggest customer. Bad news with Trump's new 25% tariffs.
Such tariffs would be very hard. It could make companies decide to move into the US market, in the United States itself, to produce there. And that also can lose jobs here in Germany.
Matthias's factory sits on the edge of Zwickau, a city where the car is king. Volkswagen is the main employer here, providing 10,000 jobs. Building vehicles is in their blood. Now more than 100 years of history are at risk. If you want to understand how key the auto industry is to German identity, think mining to the UK in its heyday. Around 700,000 people are employed in the industry, which generates almost 550 billion euros a year. At the City Museum, they're celebrating their pioneering past amid an uncertain future.
If nobody in the US will buy a German car, or less people will buy German cars, it will have impacts, of course, because you need the high numbers of building cars here.
High energy and labour costs and competition from China meant the German car industry had already been cutting jobs. At this Zwickau restaurant, they fear fresh pain from tariffs will hurt the whole community.
Volkswagen is the biggest employer in Zwickau, the main source of money for people who live here. And if they were to disappear, then people won't stay in the town anymore.
As car makers brace for impact, the EU's primed to react, while Germany's government's vowed to fight back and protect its automakers from this new American attack. Siobhan Robbins, Sky News, Zwickau.
We're just going to bring you up to date some lines that are coming out involving Mark Carney, of course, the new Canadian Prime Minister. He's had a call, it seems, this afternoon with President Trump. He's described that phone call as very constructive and saying that he and the US president have agreed to begin what is described here as comprehensive negotiations about a new economic and security relationship immediately following the election. It says that the call was also calm and that he did tell President Trump that Canada will implement retaliatory tariffs on the United States. You may remember, actually, only yesterday, Mark Carney, who's only just become the Canadian Prime Minister, said that the old Canada-US relationship, well, that was over. There's clearly been a lot of angst, hasn't there, between the United States and Canada, between President Trump, Justin Trudeau initially, and then Mark Carney, over the language and the tariffs that President Trump has used. Now, there is an election underway. We know that in Canada. Mark Carney is facing that election campaign. The election is, I'm pretty sure, at the end of April, I think the 28th of April. So there is an election campaign. Clearly, that fallout, if you like, with the United States, particularly with Donald Trump, has helped the Liberal Party, of which Mark Carney heads up, as they've gone into that election. But we are getting these lines that they have at least had a conversation today with Mark Carney saying that, yes, they will impose retaliatory tariffs, but that the phone call has been constructive and talk about a comprehensive negotiation over a new economic and security relationship. So that is the latest lines emerging, as I say, between that phone call between Mark Carney and Donald Trump. And we'll have more on that as we get it, and indeed with Jonathan Samuels at 5 o'clock on the News Hour. Let's move on, though, to the markets. Let's have a look at how they're doing on this Friday afternoon. Let's speak to Joshua Mahoney, Chief Market Analyst at Scope Markets. And Joshua, just pick up a little bit on that. It is interesting, isn't it, that obviously in this world in which tariffs are imposed and then maybe taken away again, part of the negotiating tactic, if you like, for Donald Trump, the politicians, whether it's here in the UK, whether it's in Brussels, whether it's in Ottawa and Canada, are constantly having to react, pick up the phone call, deal with Donald Trump.
Yeah, and I mean, that's part and parcel of what we're going to be seeing over the course of the next few months and probably for the remainder of Donald Trump's tenure. I don't necessarily think that this is going to be just a short-term phenomenon, but certainly we are right at the beginning. We're at the bump in the road. And ultimately, it feels like we can fear the worst because we don't necessarily know exactly how this is going to play out. But Mark Carney's conversation really does highlight exactly what we would hope would be the direction of travel, which is essentially everyone comes into this really backing their own side, wanting to look good to their own electorate. And ultimately, the resolution does come with an agreement that is hopefully good for both sides, but certainly probably going to be good for the US. As we saw in the past with China in his first tenure at the White House, they agreed to buy a certain amount of US goods, and that was done in exchange for dropping some of the tariffs. So agreements are likely to be reached, but certainly it feels at the moment like we want to fear the worst, and that's why markets are reacting in such a pessimistic manner in anticipation of what's going to happen on Wednesday.
And particularly for car manufacturers, even those in the US, Joshua.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, what's happened this week has been really crucial to understand not only what's happening in terms of sentiment around the world for those trade partners that are likely going to be hit, let's say within mainland Europe. It was always obvious that if you install a 25% tariff on, say, German cars, that German car companies would suffer. But we saw the likes of Ford, the likes of General Motors also heavily lower. And that's because they're not only putting tariffs on imports of cars, but also the inputs that go into it. And it's not an instantaneous thing to suddenly say we're going to make all of these small parts that go into the bigger picture within the US. It takes time, it takes money, and therefore even the US companies are likely to get hit.
And just very finally, we got UK retail sales figures today, and actually they weren't too bad.
No, there's some good news off the back of the OBR sort of outlook for 2025 that we saw around the spring statement, pointing towards the GDP for this year coming in at 1% rather than 2%. That's their forecast. And today we hear in terms of retail sales, and it came in at 1%. Notably within that, we saw a significant jump in terms of demand within the UK for gold. And that comes, of course, around the time that we've got fear within markets. People jump in for the havens, jump in ship from equity markets. And where do you go? Well, it used to be US Treasuries. Now it feels like the place to be is the precious metal market.
OK, Josh, really appreciate your time this afternoon on this Friday. That's Joshua there from Scope Markets. Thank you. Now, thousands of home buyers will be desperately hoping to complete their purchases in the coming hours to beat Monday's stamp duty deadline. For the first-time buyers from April the 1st, the duty will come into effect on properties above £300,000 rather than the current £425,000. Let's speak to Jonathan Stinton. He's head of mortgage relations at Coventry Building Society. Jonathan, very good afternoon to you. Are you seeing much of a rush?
Good afternoon. Yes, we are seeing first-time buyers are really keen to complete before that deadline on Monday, as you've highlighted. Obviously, it can have a significant impact depending on where in the country you're based. It could be as much as an extra £2,500 and more, depending on whether you're a first-time buyer or not. So we're certainly seeing a lot of activity there.
As you say, yeah, it could be a lot of money to a lot of people. And the question is, it gets kind of squeaky bum time, if you like, because none of these things are easy. And often this is true, isn't it, Jonathan, that house buying can be a chain, and if one of those chains collapses, the whole thing can go through the floor.
Of course, and clearly first-time buyers, new to the market, inexperienced, there's going to be a lot of nervousness, having this additional pressure around whether or not they're going to need to find additional monies to pay a stamp duty bill if they don't complete by Monday, just clearly adds to the overall pressure. And housing is such an important facet to the UK economy. It's really important that we've got a free-flowing and active housing market.
And is it pretty active at the moment, Jonathan, aside from the deadline around stamp duty?
There is positivity. Mortgage trade bodies and associations are relatively optimistic that the transaction numbers are going to increase. Gross mortgage lending is looking to increase as well, anywhere between 10 and 16%. And that's already having factored in potential stamp duty deadlines being the 1st of April. So, there is optimism there. Lots of people are coming off mortgage deals that they landed on 5 years ago and 2 years ago. And of course, you've got differences in sort of what that impact is going to be. Customers coming off 5-year deals are coming off very low interest rates, potentially onto slightly higher rates.
Yeah.
Whereas 2 years ago, if you'd have fixed, you're coming on to a much lower rate.
And just very finally, Jonathan, a lot of people have said to me, actually, you're not really going to save that much money at all, because what happens is, because there's such demand, the prices go up a little bit ahead of this deadline. And in the end, actually, you're not really saving very much money by trying to get in ahead of the 1st of April.
I think it depends on what part of the country you're based. If you're in, if you're in London in the southeast, an average first-time buyer property in London is in the region of £473,000. Today, your stamp duty bill would be just over £2,400. From Tuesday onwards, your stamp duty bill is going to be circa £8,600. So it's a significant amount of money. If you're a non-first-time buyer, if you're just an average home buyer, say £2,500. Some people find it easier than others to get that money.
Yeah, it's certainly not an insignificant sum of money at all. Jonathan, really appreciate your time this afternoon there from Coventry Building Society. Thank you. You're watching Business Live here on Sky News. Coming up in just a couple of minutes, life-size Pac-Man, the latest in the booming market for immersive entertainment experiences. That in just a brief couple of minutes. Do stay tuned.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised. If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. Alex Crawford joining us now from Ukraine.
Their personal possessions are all scattered around the place.
Our economics and data editor, Ed Conway, try and make sense of the big numbers for us.
Things can change incredibly quickly, and that's what they have done.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
We're trying to see as much as we can.
We start with breaking news.
An historic day here today.
The golden age of America begins right now.
A long-awaited ceasefire is now underway.
First question, Sky News.
This is a huge moment.
It's incredible.
Now to California.
Do you owe citizens an apology? Have you nothing to say?
Jane Secker, Sky News. Would you like to respond to us now?
Beth Rigby, Sky News.
In principle, would you agree to do that?
Criticism of you is banned. How is this a fair election?
The cameras are poised, waiting to see what the president might do next.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Sky News get the full story first.
Is this now all your territory?
Yeah. The battlefield is outside the barricades. We are in the middle of a forest. in a jungle, really, and they're attempting to keep these men alive. I'm Stuart Ramsey, and I'm Sky's chief correspondent. It's really dangerous. Many people have died riding it.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C. We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting. Every week we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
$1,500 movies? I don't want this flight to end. Fly better. Thank you.
Very welcome back to Business Live. Now, from escape rooms to life-size Monopoly, the UK entertainment business has seen a huge surge in popularity for immersive experience events. And its edition is Pac-Man Live, where players can star in their very own version of the 1980s arcade game. Let's speak to Tom Leonetti Maguire. He is Chief Executive of Little Lion Entertainment, which produces Pac-Man Live. Very good afternoon to you, Tom. Now, that does not look like Pac-Man to me. It looks rather that you're in a, I don't know, Hampton Court Palace or somewhere. What's going on there?
Spot on, Darren. I'm at the medieval zone at the Crystal Maze Live Experience here in London. I'm just, you just caught me finishing off my lunch.
Yeah, indeed, those pies do look rather tasty. Let's talk about Pac-Man if we can first, because, you know, you guys have launched it this week. It's a very famous, I'm told, 1980s arcade game. It is. And people can now play it immersively.
Yeah. So Pac-Man, the live experience, is our latest experience. It's within an arcade arena. So arcade arenas are giant video game boxes that we make. We have one in Manchester, one in Dubai, and Pac-Man's the latest game to go through that space. So we're really excited about where this leads for the future of entertainment. And this notion of stepping into a real-life video game is something that I'm incredibly passionate about. And I think it's where the future lies, actually.
Yeah, indeed. I've seen, for example, Monopoly as well. You can essentially play a kind of a 3D real-life version of it. Do you think this is what the audience are looking for, something beyond, you know, the old-school board game or even the old-school computer game?
Yeah, and look, psychologically, I think there's a reason that people are so attuned to video games at the moment, why it's such a big industry. I think they're really understanding that people need this escapism, even more so than traditional cultural bastions like theatre and cinema. And what we're doing, which I think is incredibly interesting, is playing in that liminal space between video games and theatre and real life. And I think that's what people are really excited about and picking up on, and that's why they keep coming in their droves.
And this is different again, and I'm sure these guys are rivals. I mean, I've played, you know, kind of 3D immersive games where you put a headset on, but you don't really physically move around. This is different to that again, as we can see on the television. There's a hell of a lot of moving around.
Yeah. And actually, I'm not an incredible fan of VR. This is very much AR. So it's augmented reality. You're alive in the space. And what we create is a giant arena with 360-degree projection. So it really does feel like stepping into the world of a video game. And I think that's really something.
Yeah, indeed it is. And I think that Pac-Man Live is now in Manchester. You picked up on VR. That was the word I was trying to find. We will leave it there, I'm afraid, because we've run out of time. But you enjoy that rather tasty-looking pig's head that's on the table. Tom, thank you very much indeed.
Oh, thanks, Darren.
Cheers. Thank you very much indeed. OK, that is it from me on Business Live for today and indeed for the entire week. We're back on Monday at 11:30. Do join me then if you can. Up next, it is the News Hour with John and Savios and indeed continuing coverage of that earthquake that has hit Myanmar and Thailand. Earlier on today, fears that thousands of people may well have died in Myanmar. Continuing live coverage with Jonathan Samuels up next here on Sky. Do stay tuned for that. I'll see you on Monday. Have a really good weekend. Goodbye.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club. 4 more years! Free wherever you get your news. I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.